This is not a political channel, this is not a political video. This is a video about how excessive political involvement, regardless of party affiliation, works against the interest of shareholders and CEOs. And more specifically, it's about how damaging it is for Tesla that Elon Musk has involved himself so closely with a very controversial presidential administration. Almost every aspect of Tesla has taken a hit because of this, from their public perception, stock prices, global sales, investor sentiment, future outlooks. I mean, basically just everything has gone downhill. And we're going to talk about every one of those and the impacts that they've had. But first, I want to talk about this viral article from this current affairs blog, and it's called Boycott Tesla. And to be clear, this is a very partisan article tending to lean toward the left side of politics, but nonetheless, it summarizes the issue of what's going on really well with this paragraph. Musk's political swing is a brand disaster for Tesla because their product is electric cars. That means that their most likely consumers are Democrats. The Republican Party broadly dislikes electric cars and has promised a fossil future, while Tesla owners have a mix of politics. Gallup polls found that 71% of Republicans, quote, would not consider owning an electric vehicle, compared with just 17% of Democrats. This is not purely ideological, because Republicans are more likely to live in areas with less charging infrastructure, while cities and areas with more progressive governments typically have more plugs available. But because Teslas are expensive and charging an electric car can be inconvenient, climate conscientious, and the appeal of the green movement is a major reason why people buy them. With their combination of luxury and eco-friendliness, Tesla has long become, quote, the choice of car for virtue signaling Democrats. And in fact, a major problem for EVs is that they are seen as a political statement and not as cars. And this is by and large true. Between politics, location, and some other demographic reasons, Democrats are far more likely to be regular purchasers of Teslas. And when you align with the political party, specifically the party that isn't as on board with electronic vehicles, then of course you're going to alienate the consumers. And in this case, the consumers that you're alienating are the ones that were purchasing your cars in the first place. I understand it's hard to separate the politics from the brand and the impacts, so let's go with a non-political example to see exactly what I'm talking about. And in this case, I chose to talk about New Coke. By 1985, Coca-Cola had been losing market share to soft drinks and non-cola beverages for several years. Blind taste tests suggested that consumers preferred the sweeter taste of competing product Pepsi Cola, and so the Coca-Cola recipe was reformulated. The American public reacted negatively, and the New Coke was considered a major failure. The company reintroduced the original formula within 3 months, rebranding Coca-Cola Classic, resulting in a significant boost in sales. This led to speculation that the New Coke formula had been employed to simulate sales in the original Coca-Cola, which the company has vehemently denied. The story of New Coke remains influential as a cautionary tale against tampering with an established and successful brand. So Coke had its core customers, but then it made a change that alienated those core customers. The people that liked Pepsi continued to drink Pepsi, and the people that liked Coca-Cola stopped drinking Coca-Cola because it was different. The change made by the company had a group of core consumers that it then alienated, and disaster ensued. What's going on with Tesla is basically the same thing, except instead of a formula change for a soft drink, it's a political change. In fact, the impact on the brand has been so bad that even JP Morgan Chase analysts are commenting on it. JP Morgan auto analyst Ryan Brinkman warned clients the politically divisive entrepreneur is, in all likelihood, repelling far more prospective car buyers than he has gained through his proximity to Donald Trump and far right in Europe. As a result, Brinkman slashed his estimate for Q1 global deliveries to just 355,000 vehicles, this is for Tesla, from 440,000 vehicles previously, the latest analyst to take a cautious view of the current reporting period. This compares to its most recent figure of 495,000 for the fourth quarter of last year, and Bloomberg's consensus of 418,000 vehicles. Quote, "We struggle to think of anything analogous in the history of the automotive industry in which a brand has lost so much value so quickly," Brinkman wrote in a research note published Wednesday, cutting his price target to $120 from $135 previously. The closest comparison he could think of was the consumer backlash in China against Korean brands in 2017 after Seoul, that's the capital of Korea, installed American-made THAAD missile systems that enraged Beijing. In that case, the loss of market share was permanent, he wrote. And this is significant because JP Morgan is a bank, among other things, but primarily they are a bank, and primarily their business is making as much money as possible. Their motivation and their political alignment is money. Make money, that's what they want to do. So probably their take is not politically influenced here. The brand damage is there, it is prominent, and it is also very possibly permanent. And you can see this brand damage because of the stock price. Let's go to the last year here. From their peak, Tesla has gone down about 50%. And this is the best way to realize brand damage and influence, because every time something scandalous happens with a brand of any kind, their stock price takes a hit from it. But Tesla seems to have taken a pretty significant stock price hit, going down 50%. So that's where we are as far as the company itself is concerned. But I want to talk a little bit more about the specifics around the company, namely like consumer perception, investor sentiment, and the long-term implications that these both have on Tesla as a brand. And before we get into that, if you like this kind of deep dive news and updates, I'd love a subscription. I'm trying to post about twice a week. So first, I want to talk about consumer sentiment. And as you can imagine, it's not great. Just look at this article from QZ. Just look at California, a state known for its rapid adoption of clean energy and promotion of EVs and related technology, including charging infrastructure. Although the Tesla Model Y remains the best-selling car in the Golden State, registrations fell 17% year over year last quarter, with the California New Car Dealers Association noting that sales, quote, may have peaked. It's Tesla's third straight quarter of registration declines in California. To be clear, EV sales have continued to grow in California. They're just growing much more slowly, and they're also not growing as far as Teslas are concerned. People are continuing to buy EVs, but they're not buying Teslas nearly as much as they were in the past. But it's not just California. People's perception and likelihood of purchasing a Tesla is going down pretty much everywhere, as you can see from this Business Insider article. The American public's favorability of Tesla has fallen to a 9-year low, a recent survey found. In addition to Tesla struggling with declining sales in multiple markets and a falling stock price, sentiment among young liberals and moderates in the US has fallen off a cliff, recent YouGov surveys found, which were first reported by Sherwood News. Overall, America's impressions of Tesla has dropped to a score of minus 12.7 on Wednesday, YouGov found, the lowest it's been since 2016, when the firm began measuring U.S. sentiment towards Tesla through daily surveys. Tesla scored the lowest among liberals at minus 34.9%, with moderates at minus 9.1. By comparison, the average impression score for all automakers was 17.2%. And as you can imagine, that's bad. That's really bad, especially when you account for the fact that Democrats are far more likely to be Tesla purchasers than Republicans. So there is, yes, a small upside that more Republicans are more favorably viewing Tesla as a brand, but probably that's not really translating to sales, and it's certainly not translating to nearly as many sales as they are losing from Democrats who are no longer purchasing Teslas. It's like dollar stores gaining favorability with billionaires. Like, sure, there's nothing wrong with dollar stores gaining favorability with billionaires, but probably that's not going to translate to any kind of a sales boost because billionaires don't really shop at dollar stores. So their opinion on them doesn't really matter. Now that's consumer sentiment, which can, to be fair, often be different from investor sentiment, as is evidenced by the fact that over the last, 2 to 3 years, the stock market has seen amazing returns, and basically every consumer I know does not feel like they are better off than ever. But as it turns out, investors are not actually a huge fan of this either. We already saw that JP Morgan, probably apolitically, was predicting that Tesla would not do as well as it has in recent years, but I want to highlight someone else. And the reason I want to highlight this guy, this analyst Daniel Ives, is because he's a huge investor and believer in Tesla as a brand. So when his perception of the brand changes, or he starts to predict that the brand overall will start to experience issues because other people's perceptions of the brand are changing, then that's worth listening to. One of Elon Musk's biggest cheerleaders is losing patience in the billionaire entrepreneur and says it's time for some, quote, tough love. On Tuesday, Wedbush tech analyst Dan Ives, one of Tesla's longest running and most vociferous bulls, deviated from his typically optimistic analysis and penned an unusually dire note to Tesla investors. While he still maintained his outperform ratings on the stock, Ives warned that investor patience is wearing very thin amid Musk's adventures into politics, and the resulting backlash has caused to the brand. Musk is, quote, showing no attention to Tesla during this turbulent time, when protesters are vandalizing Tesla dealerships and showrooms, and consumers are selling off their vehicles, Ives wrote. A moment of truth lies ahead for Musk and Tesla, and how Musk handles the next few months will be critical, Ives said. So even Tesla bulls are growing cautious of Musk's decisions to both politically align himself and also divide his time between Tesla and the other brands and Doge, the government agency. Now, I think it's important to highlight here that people will always praise or criticize Tesla based on pretty much their political parties. For example, Fox News will probably always be singing his praises, at least for the entire time Trump is in office, whereas MSNBC will constantly tout that he is the devil. And for the most part, both sides are completely worth ignoring because it has no branding on what people really think about the company. But when you start to get into politically neutral territory with companies like JP Morgan and super fans like Daniel Ives saying it's gone too far and is hurting the brand, well, then you know things might be going bad. And how bad might things be going? Well, it's kind of hard to say. If I had to guess, I think I would say that this is permanent. Target, for example, suffered boycotts from a lot of conservative people, and its stock has yet to recover, if it ever will. And I would argue that the Tesla boycotts are far worse than the Target boycotts, because people have a lot more EV options now. They might not be as good as Tesla's, but those other companies will catch up. And the consumers that are politically motivated, primarily those on the left, will happily shift over to the other brands. The most interesting part of this whole situation for me is that this did not really have to happen. Primarily, Americans support government efficiency. Most Americans, about 76% that I most recently saw in a poll, want the government to be more efficient because it's their tax dollars. Of course they do. And Musk could have easily aligned himself more softly with the right party and still done Doge, but done it in a way that wasn't quite so politically inflammatory. I think probably that would have resulted in damage to the brand, but I think it would have been a lot less damage to the brand than is currently taking place, with Tesla kind of seeing the biggest tanking they ever have. I can step back and look at this whole situation and think, it didn't have to be like this, and yet it is. Thanks for watching.